Most people think they understand INFJs because they project simplicity onto complexity. They convince themselves you're quiet because you're shy, kind because you're naive, forgiving because you're weak. But the truth is far sharper and far more uncomfortable. INFs see more than people want to be seen, understand more than people want to admit, and notice truths that others spend their whole lives avoiding. And that is exactly why most people get the INFJ wrong. Not because you are difficult to understand, but because understanding you would force them to confront the parts of themselves they pretend don't exist. There comes a moment when someone realizes an INFJ wasn't confused, wasn't overthinking, wasn't imagining things. They knew the truth the entire time. They saw the inconsistencies in your tone, the shift in your energy, the story behind your words. They picked up the quiet betrayals, the unspoken desires, the emotional patterns you didn't even know you were repeating. Most people don't misunderstand INFJs by accident. They misunderstand them because the truth an INFJ sees is inconvenient. It removes excuses. It exposes motives. It reflects back the reality they've been dodging. And sometimes, the truth an INFJ quietly holds is the very thing someone spends their whole life trying to hide. If you've ever felt this, the weight of knowing the truth that others refuse to acknowledge, then this video will feel like someone finally speaking the language you've been thinking in your entire life. Before we dive into the key points, answer this. Have people misunderstood you because they couldn't handle the truth you saw in them? Comment the word truthseer. And if you're new here, subscribe. Because most places silence INFJ truth, but here we decode it. INFJs notice uncomfortable truths that people aren't ready to face. Most people walk through life seeing only what they want to see, the softened version of events, the curated version of themselves, the parts of reality that feel convenient and safe. But INFJs don't have that luxury. Their intuition cuts through the surface like a blade, illuminating truths that others bury under excuses, distractions, or emotional noise. They notice the tension behind someone's smile, the bitterness hidden beneath a joke, the insecurity disguised as arrogance. And once they see it, they cannot unsee it. This ability is not something they learned, it is something they've always carried, a quiet, piercing awareness that reveals what people try hardest to hide. The problem is that truth is rarely comfortable. And people rarely respond with gratitude when they feel exposed. An INFJ can hear a single sentence and understand the emotional story behind it. They can watch someone's behavior for 5 minutes and grasp patterns that take others years to notice. Their mind naturally scans for contradictions, the mismatch between word and intention, the hidden wound behind the outburst, the motive behind the kindness. And because they sense truth so quickly, others mistake them for judgmental or overly analytical. But the INFJ is not judging, they're simply aware. Too aware. And in a world where most people avoid their own truth, awareness feels threatening. People would rather call the INFJ wrong, dramatic, or overthinking than admit that the INFJ is quietly naming something they don't want to confront. This is why INFJs are misunderstood so often. They reveal reality without speaking. Their presence alone can make someone feel seen in a way they weren't prepared for. And when someone isn't ready to face their own truth, the insecurity, the lie, the unresolved pain, they push the INFJ away, distort their intentions, or accuse them of imagining things. But deep down, the INFJ knows exactly what they saw. And whether others accept it or not, the truth does not disappear simply because someone isn't ready to face it. People project their own insecurities onto INFJ to avoid accountability. When someone stands in front of an INFJ, they are not just meeting a person. They are standing in front of a mirror. And for many, that mirror reflects insecurities they've spent years running from. Instead of confronting their jealousy, their dishonesty, their inconsistency, or their emotional immaturity, they take the easier path. They place the weight of those flaws onto the INFJ. Suddenly, the INFJ becomes too sensitive, too deep, too emotional, too distant, or too intense. But these labels are rarely accurate. They are shields people use to avoid facing the uncomfortable truth inside themselves. It's far simpler to blame the INFJ for seeing too much than to admit the parts of themselves they've been avoiding. This projection happens because INFJs notice subtle inconsistencies, the contradiction between someone's words and their actions, the insecurity beneath their confidence, the unresolved pain behind their anger. And instead of accepting that the INFJ has simply observed something real, many people distort the narrative to protect their ego. They shift responsibility away from their own behavior by projecting it onto the INFJ. The person who lies claims the INFJ is mistrustful. The person who manipulates accuses the INFJ of overreacting. The person who avoids emotions labels the INFJ as too intense. These projections are not reflections of the INFJ's truth. They are reflections of someone else's fear of being held accountable. Because INFJs rarely defend themselves aggressively, projections often go unchallenged. People mistake INFJ quietness for agreement, not realizing the INFJ sees exactly what is happening. And while the INFJ may not confront the person directly, they internalize the experience deeply. They understand that the projection isn't about them, it's about the other person's unresolved wounds, insecurities, or denial. But knowing that doesn't make the projection hurt less. It simply makes it clearer. Over time, INFJs learn that being misunderstood is often a sign they've stepped too close to a truth someone wasn't ready to face, and the projection becomes a wall built out of fear, not reality. INFJs hear what's not being said, which threatens those who hide behind words. Long before a conversation ends, an INFJ has already heard the truth sitting between the sentences. They hear the hesitation behind a rehearsed excuse, the tremor underneath forced confidence, the silence that reveals more than any explanation ever could. It isn't magic, it's the result of a lifetime spent observing tone, rhythm, intention, and emotional context. While most people focus on what is said, INFJs instinctively tune into why it was said and what the speaker is trying desperately to avoid. And this ability deeply unsettles anyone who uses words as a shield rather than a bridge. When someone hides behind charm, manipulation, half-truths, or emotional masks, they rely on people taking their words at face value. But an INFJ doesn't. They hear the crack in the mask, the unspoken fear, the hidden motive, and that quiet accuracy terrifies those who believed they were speaking in disguise. This is why certain individuals feel exposed in an INFJ's presence without knowing why. It's not because the INFJ says anything confrontational. It's because their silence listens more deeply than most people's questions. When someone hides behind carefully constructed words, they expect their script to work. They expect to control the narrative. But the INFJ sees through it immediately. People who rely on deception, performance, or emotional sleight of hand realize, sometimes instantly, that their words are not landing the way they intended. The INFJ's eyes do not match the reaction they were hoping for. There's no admiration, no confusion, no unquestioning acceptance. Instead, there's recognition. And that recognition alone is enough to unsettle them. What makes this even more threatening is that INFJs rarely call someone out directly. They simply adjust. Their energy shifts, their engagement softens, and their distance grows. And for those who depend on words to manipulate or control, that shift feels like losing power in real time. They sense that the INFJ knows too much, not because anything was said, but because so much was understood. People who hide behind words fear INFJ for this exact reason. The INFJ doesn't need the confession to know the truth. They already heard it in the silence. Their emotional intelligence exposes motives others want to keep buried. An INFJ doesn't uncover truth by force, they uncover it by awareness. Their emotional intelligence operates like a quiet spotlight, illuminating the intentions people work hardest to hide. While most individuals navigate the world reacting to what's visible, INFJs move through it sensing the emotional currents underneath. They recognize the pressure in someone's voice when they're lying to themselves, the hunger behind a compliment meant to manipulate, the resentment disguised as humor, the fear pretending to be indifference. These subtle cues form a pattern that the INFJ interprets long before anyone else even notices there's something to interpret. And this terrifies people who have something to protect, because the INFJ sees the motive before the performance is complete. What makes their insight so disarming is that it doesn't come with judgment or accusation. It comes with clarity. People who are used to hiding behind charm, authority, or emotional theatrics feel exposed in the presence of an INFJ, not because the INFJ confronts them, but because the INFJ understands them too quickly. They sense when someone is using kindness as currency, when vulnerability is a tactic rather than truth, when a story is being told to control perception rather than share experience. The INFJ reads these signs instinctively, stitching them into a deeper psychological portrait that others cannot see. The person whose motives are being revealed often feels this happening, a subtle discomfort, a tightening in their posture, a sudden need to fill the silence with more words. It's the fear of being understood by someone who hasn't been given permission to understand. And because INFJs rarely expose what they know, this knowledge becomes even more powerful. Their quiet awareness forces hidden motives to rise to the surface because people begin reacting to the feeling of being seen. They become defensive, overly explanatory, or strangely distant. Their guilt or insecurity begins revealing itself through behavior, confirming everything the INFJ already sensed. In this way, the INFJ never needs to dig. The truth unravels itself under the weight of their perception. Their emotional intelligence doesn't just read people, it reveals them. And for those who depend on buried motives to maintain control, that revelation is the most threatening truth of all. People label INFJs as too sensitive to dismiss truths they don't want to confront. This is the oldest defense mechanism people use against the INFJ. When the truth feels too sharp, they attack the one who noticed it. Calling an INFJ too sensitive is not an observation. It is a strategy. It is a way to invalidate the insight that threatens to expose what someone would rather keep buried. The INFJ notices the anger behind the joke, the longing behind the arrogance, the fear behind the cruelty. They see the emotional fracture someone is working desperately to hide. And instead of facing that vulnerability, people deflect by framing the INFJ as the problem. You're overthinking, you're imagining things, you're reading too much into it. These phrases are not about the INFJ's accuracy, they are about the speaker's avoidance. What people often forget is that INFJ sensitivity doesn't come from fragility. It comes from perception. They feel deeply because they understand deeply. They catch subtle changes in tone, energy, and behavior that most people overlook because the INFJ mind is always listening beneath the surface. When they point out a truth, even gently, it forces someone to look at a part of themselves they aren't ready to face. So instead of acknowledging the insight, the person labels the INFJ as overly emotional. This tactic shifts responsibility away from the real issue and places it onto the INFJ, allowing the other person to stay comfortably hidden behind their defenses. It's psychological misdirection. If I can make you doubt your perception, I won't have to face what you saw. But here is the irony. Every time someone labels an INFJ as too sensitive, they confirm the very truth the INFJ noticed. The defensiveness, the dismissal, the attempt to reframe the situation is proof that the INFJ's insight struck close to the emotional wound. Over time, INFJs learn that these accusations are not reflections of their weakness, but reflections of the other person's fear. And as they grow, they stop internalizing the label. They stop shrinking to protect others from reality. They realize that their sensitivity is not a flaw, it is their compass. It shows them who is willing to grow and who will attack anything that threatens their comfortable illusion. INFJs mirror people's inner world back to them, and some cannot handle the reflection. This is the silent force behind why so many people feel exposed around an INFJ without understanding why. The INFJ doesn't try to mirror anyone, it happens naturally. Their intuition absorbs emotional tone, their empathy reads subtle cues, and their mind reconstructs the unspoken story behind someone's behavior. When an INFJ responds, they often respond to the truth, not to the mask. And for many people, that is deeply unsettling. They suddenly feel seen in ways they weren't prepared for. Their insecurities, contradictions, and unhealed wounds appear to reflect back at them through the INFJ's calm eyes, and instead of feeling understood, they feel confronted, even when the INFJ says nothing directly. People who rely on charm, bravado, or emotional manipulation find themselves rattled because their strategies don't work on INFJs. The INFJ reacts to the emotional core, not the performance. When they speak, they unintentionally highlight inconsistencies or vulnerabilities the other person has spent years avoiding. It feels like being looked at from the inside out. Some people interpret this as judgment, but it's not. It's clarity, and clarity is threatening to anyone who survives on illusions. So instead of embracing the insight, they withdraw, lash out, or accuse the INFJ of imagining things, anything to escape the discomfort of seeing themselves too clearly. The heartbreaking part is that INFJs rarely realize they're doing this. To them, it feels normal to understand what sits beneath someone's words. It feels natural to respond to the emotional truth rather than the spoken narrative. They do not mirror to expose, they mirror to connect. But not everyone wants connection at that depth. Some want relationships where their shadows stay hidden and their flaws remain unchallenged. When an INFJ accidentally reflects those shadows back, the person either grows or breaks the connection entirely. Over time, INFJs learn that their insight is both a gift and a filter. It reveals who is ready for authenticity and who fears their own reflection too much to stay. Their intuition disrupts illusions, making others defensive rather than honest. This is one of the most misunderstood dynamics INFJs live with. Their intuition doesn't just observe reality, it penetrates it. It cuts through charm, surface emotions, and practiced personas with surgical precision. People who build their identity on illusions, exaggerations, or emotional manipulation feel the INFJ's intuition before the INFJ ever speaks. It's that sudden shift in the air, the sense of being figured out, the discomfort of realizing their usual tactics won't work. The INFJ isn't trying to expose anyone, but their presence alone threatens the fragile stories people tell themselves. And instead of choosing honesty, many choose defensiveness. They pull away, attack, deny, or blame, anything to avoid the collapse of the narrative they've spent years constructing. For the INFJ, this reaction is both painful and clarifying. They never aim to embarrass or confront. In fact, they often soften their words, hold back insights, and apologize for truths they didn't intend to reveal. But intuition isn't something they switch off, it's instinct. They can sense when someone's motives don't match their words, when affection masks control, or when confidence hides insecurity. Their mind absorbs contradictions automatically and plays them back in a quiet, intuitive flash that's nearly impossible for others to hide from. When INFJs speak, or even simply look at someone with that knowing calm, the other person feels their illusion cracking. And most people don't react well when the mask begins to slip. This is why INFJs often become scapegoats for other people's discomfort. Instead of saying, "You're right," people say, "You're imagining things," "You're too sensitive," or "You're overthinking." These reactions aren't about the INFJ at all. They are defense mechanisms. The INFJ's intuition forces a level of self-awareness many aren't ready to face. Yet this same ability is also what draws authentic people to INFJs. Those who don't rely on illusions feel profoundly safe with them. Over time, INFJs learn that disrupting illusions is not a curse. It is their natural filter, revealing who is willing to grow and who is committed to hiding. When you look at the INFJ story from above, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. They were never meant to live in shallow spaces. Their intuition, their depth, their ability to see beneath the surface, it was never designed to make life easier. It was designed to make it truer. And yes, that truth disrupts illusions. It rattles insecure people. It exposes manipulation. It forces clarity where others prefer confusion. But it also attracts the rare few who value honesty over ego, growth over comfort, and connection over performance. Those are the people who stay. Those are the people who deserve the INFJ lens. Before you go, ask yourself one question. Have you ever been punished for seeing the truth too clearly? If the answer is yes, you already understand the INFJ experience more than you think. Type "Clarity Seer" in the comments if you watched until the end. It tells me you're one of the rare minds who doesn't run from depth.